If you could remove one event from your life, what would it be? This kid kneed me in the nuts as hard as he could in high school, and as an adult I've had constant pain for over a decade from various inguinal hernias. Fuck you, Derek. Being robbed by someone I considered a friend ruined my trust in people. It's not something I often talk about because I still experience shame. I lost my eyesight in my right eye because I was a teenager who thought I knew better and did not wear a paintball mask. It was such a stupid mistake and caused me an endless amount of trauma. However, I'm grateful that it taught me in hardest way that impairments are not always visual pain. At this point in my life, I have lived longer without vision in that eye than I did with. Oftentimes, it is common for me to be completely unaware that anything is abnormal about myself until I'm made to realize that something or someone is trying to grab my attention from the right side, and then it becomes a stark reminder of that stupid fateful day. Usually I shrug it off, but sometimes it still stings. So, my answer to this question is that I would have never asked my mom to buy me a paintball gun. Ultimately, I think out of all the events that shaped my being, this one has the least likelihood of having drastic butterfly effect type consequences. This is crazy. I literally lost the vision in my right eye from a paintball game. I took my mask off when I was out of ammo and immediately took one to the eye, just below. It broke my orbital and the concussion was so bad I couldn't walk or stop vomiting. I was camping in rural Alaska, and so it took me 5 hours just to get home. I didn't go to the doctor until several days later, and even later for an eye doctor until the swelling went down enough to see the eye. I had a couple surgeries and I have vision. 2200/20, but was totally blind in that eye for several months. The eye is filled with scar tissue that can't be fixed, and I have a little GL butt lens inserted inside it to replace the natural lens that was ruined by a cataract. I also had my retina reattached. Man, this has to be the worst timing I've heard. Finding and reading the spiral-bound notebook filled with my mum's ramblings during one of her bad bipolar episodes, wherein she described being raped at the age of 20. I was 8 when I read it. I witnessed a nasty murder. I was in my Jeep with the top down and watched two guys argue on the sidewalk. I didn't want to get involved, so I just sat there. One guy pulled out a homemade knife, shank, and plunged it into the other guy's eye. The sound was horrific. I wish I had beat my horn or something and tried to get them to move along. The guy was later caught and convicted of murder, but I'll never forget the crunching sound when that knife went into his skull. Nightmares for life. Also, my motorcycle accident where I nearly lost my leg 35 years ago. That sucked. Agreeing to a deal with my parents. It led to me going to their choice of my college instead of mine. And it led to me having a ton of debt. And it led to me working dead-end jobs instead of becoming a teacher. Funnily, when your life goes south because of the decisions that were forced on you, some parents always make it out as if you were the loser who could not make it work for him and were to blame. It's obviously human nature to avoid taking the blame, but it's a dick move that you can't counter. Reversely, whenever you rebel and it all turns out well for you, they feel an unnatural amount of pride in their upbringing and all the times they were obstacles in your path are just forgotten. My brother's suicide. I believe my life would be completely different had this not had happened. Me too, mate. It really separates your whole life into before and after. Lost my wife at 28. She went to the hospital with a major headache and I stayed home with our 3-month-old daughter. She didn't make it through the night. Brain aneurysm. I never really realized it, but my whole existence since then has been before and after. Edit. Thank you guys for all the questions and well wishes. This is the most I've ever really opened up about all of this stuff, and it is proving to be a bit therapeutic. Breaking my ankle when I was 8. I was trying to climb my grandma's rose apple tree and shattered my ankle. I'm in my 20s and have had 7 operations on it and ended up ducking the other leg while trying to avoid injury on my shitty ankle haul because I wanted a fruit and grandma told me to wait until morning. My life would have been much easier and less painful if I listened to my gran, and now I just wish she was still here telling me that I need to clean my ears and listen more, because whenever I didn't listen to her I ended in stupid situations. Broke my talus bone. The biggest bone in your foot. Playing pickup basketball, since I wore the wrong shoes that week. Just demolished it and ruined my 22nd summer. But that's when I would lay in the yard and just loved reading On the Road and other classics. Made me want to become a writer. Being abused by my dad. It has really messed me up. I can't stand the nightmares. I hate that his abuse makes me scared of every man I meet. I hated having to tell my mom what happened and seeing her heartbreak. I hate that I loved him. He could have recovered from the drinking and gambling and I would have forgiven him. I could even forgive the spankings and the anger. But you can't be forgiven after touching your own daughter like that. There is no going back. Being bitten by a baboon vipera on the right ankle. Most extreme pain I've ever been in. I puked and screamed on the way to the hospital. My dad dropping dead in front of me when I was a teen. My mom suffering before she passed. Seeing my mother in pain was the worst experience of my life. Fuck cancer. Really severe arthritis for mine. 35 years of steroids and every other anti-arthritic on the market. 3 hip replacements. 2 knee replacements. Prosthetic knuckles. Pins to stabilize both wrists and a spinal fusion. And still she was in constant pain. My mom had a pain threshold which would stun a rhino. And still she was in agony most of every day until her sudden death a year or so back. Hard to choose. Some of the worst brought some of the best. I would say my marriage, but it brought me my best friends that helped me after it ended. Also she got me to volunteer with her to help rehabilitate baby songbirds at the university. Something I never would have thought of doing on my own. I wouldn't give that up, even though my life sucks post-divorce. Crossing a road in Melbourne in 1999. Got hit by car and given permanent brain damage. And from that moment my life changed course forever. If it hadn't happened, I would have had a much different, much less painful life. I was working part-time as a gardener, studying it, preparing to apply for uni to do a course on journalism, which I had a good chance of getting into. Was also doing volunteer work with street people, and paneling and presenting a couple of radio shows on a minor AM radio station. And had just done over a year of physical rehabilitation for a bad back. Lots of gym and fitness work. Physio and I was about the fittest I've ever been. Then I crossed the road and everything changed forever. In the opposite, I was the driver when an allegedly drunk/drugged up teenager crossed the road at night wearing black clothes in the rain. I didn't even hit the brakes, that's how fast it happened. I stopped and had to run out into the middle of a busy intersection to make sure he wasn't hit by any other cars. He lived. But it sounds like he is going through what you're going through. The images and sounds I have of that night have almost ruined my life. I went through hell with my brain and mind replaying those constantly. I'm finally on the way back to who I once was, but I doubt I'll ever feel whole again. It's a tie between losing my dad and losing my sister. No need to be sorry for my loss or to feel sorry for me. I just wish I'd had longer with them. My parents meeting. The guy's always been a dick. She deserves so much better. Either quitting college or going in the first place. My wife passing away. Let's just remove that part and have her sitting next to me right now talking about the ham she's going to make for Thanksgiving. The time I had ear surgery and the anesthesia fucked with my brain and now I can't ducking function as a person. I went in for surgery on a broken leg and left with brain damage. I know what you are going through. Being beaten by my dad for going to a friend's wedding. I had to go because I was the maid of honor and I already told my parents. Got home. Was accused of not telling them about it. Coming home late, 7 to 8 p.m. and not attending my uncle's get-together party. I knew what was gonna happen next. So I ran into my room and locked the door. Banging on the door, with me barring the door with my body. Then my dad broke in with a crowbar to beat me. Ran away after that for a while. How old were you? 18. My great-grandpa died after a long battle with dementia well into his 80s or even 90s. I was a kid at the time. I think I was maybe 11. We called him Grandpa cause the relationship Grandpa was just Papa. So Grandpa and I were close. Same with my twin sister too. He loved seeing us. Our dad would bring us over a lot. He lived with my grandma, my dad's mom. Well, we all know the end is coming. me and my sister to a lesser degree because of our ages, but of course we hear all the adults saying this will be his last Christmas and he doesn't have much time left. The event I would erase is an event I'll never forgive my father for. He was an abusive man to begin with, but this is what makes me hope he rots in fucking hell. My grandpa had a day where he actually knew what was happening. The last few weeks he didn't know what was going on, who he was, who any of his family was, but he knew this day, and he asked for me and my sister. He asked for the girls. My grandma called my dad, told him grandpa was more mentally there than he had been in weeks, told him he was asking to see the girls. My dad never told us. He took our stepsister instead. He died a couple days later, and we didn't find out until he was already gone that he was asking for us. It breaks my heart. I remember eagerly showing him everything I learned in gymnastics and how excited he always was for me. I remember feeling so happy when he asked me to help him with something because I felt like he trusted me. Even dumb things like getting him a piece of pie after dinner or refilling his drink was so fun for me. I'll never forgive my dad, but not for me. My grandpa didn't deserve that. In his last lucid days he asked for us, and he didn't get that. It makes me cry knowing he died and didn't get everything he asked for, especially when it came to seeing his family that he was close to. My grandma was so mad and upset with my dad for a long time, but she eventually, at least outwardly, let him go. But I won't do that because he doesn't deserve it. So yeah, I would remove that whole event from my life and my grandpa's if I could. If I could change it, I would have came and saw him some other way. But at least he still knew he was loved. He was never alone, and that's what matters. Edit. I didn't expect this to get much, but I want to say thank you to the people who validated me in my feelings, and thank you to all those who cared. When someone responded saying this made them cry, it made me take a long and hard look at this story again, because I had become desensitized to my father's abuse. When this happened as a kid, it wasn't shocking at all. It was upsetting, but it wasn't surprising in the least. To those of you who think him wrong for having no relationship with him, I hope you learn. I hope you don't have to experience this, but that you realize that life is different for all of us. This story wasn't the only time my dad was abusive, and not the only way. Anyone curious can see my post history on this, because I have nothing to hide, and am a firm believer in family being held accountable, and never enduring abuse. Don't endure it, because they're your family. Don't ignore it, because they love you, or they raised you. I know the people who think him wrong for this just need to learn. And I really hope you are open to it, and never tell someone who experienced abuse they have to forgive them. Also maybe learn to read a room, and see that the majority of people think differently, and although the majority of people thinking differently doesn't make you wrong, it should make you think. Thank you all for the cathartic release. I'd appreciate no one sharing this outside of Reddit, so I don't end up having to deal with family issues again, but everything I've said is honest and true, so why should I really care? I'm really fine now for the most part. I can't sit here and say it doesn't hurt that my dad was always like this, or that even when I tried to be a good kid he didn't like me. But I can say I know it wasn't my fault, and I know I'm happier without him in my life, so please respect that. Thank you all. Thank you especially to those who cried from this and told me. It genuinely gave me chills seeing people say that, because I was used to this from my dad. Seeing others affected by it made me feel so much better, in knowing I wasn't alone in how I felt, and that my feelings were valid. Thank you, and sorry for any issues with my typing. I'm on mobile. Genuinely hoping the best for all of you, even if you were rude to me. I'm so sorry to hear that. That is just downright horrible. I cried reading this, and I completely understand how you could never forgive your dad. You have a kind soul. Thank you for caring. People try to defend his actions, and it's just actually insane. My mother telling investigators that despite there being an eyewitness, that I lied about being sexually assaulted by a grown man when I was a child. They chose to believe her instead of a traumatized broken kid. Ruined my life. The day I had to call 911 on dad's mistress to trying to kill him because he decided to stay with mistress 1 for whom he left my mom and my 5 siblings for. Talk about hot mess. I just wish I stood up and kicked our varsity coach in the nuts or face when he suggested my teammates beat the shit out of me for being late to practice 1 week after my aunt and uncle passed away 5 days apart. I will never understand that moment or why it happened, but I felt like nothing. Worthless. I think it really says something that the moment you would pick to remove is not either of their deaths, but the moment someone was needlessly cruel to you afterwards. Death is a part of life, but senseless punishment and suffering isn't, nor should it be. It kinda reminds me of the conflict between Jane Valjean and Javert in Les Miserables. That you wish that people had just been kind to you in a time of struggle and sadness is something I think we can all relate to. Having the final impressions of my teeth done after getting my braces off when I was 15. The tech thought it would be fun to put both trays in my mouth and watch me struggle to breathe. My dad just sat there and watched it all go down without batting an eyelash. Had my mom been there, it would have gone very differently. As a result, it screwed up my jaw for 17 years. I haven't trusted dentists since. My first cigarette. Low-key winner. It's just so simple. Imagine a world with 0 addictions. It'd prevent so many stories on here. Being born to my mom. I like being alive. Though my mom is an actual monster. I wish it was someone else. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more videos.